Who is to blame for the lack of civility in our politics? This was a week that saw Boris Johnson invoke the name of murdered Labour MP Jo Cox when talking about the need to deliver Brexit. And Labour's shadow Foreign Secretary Emily Thornberry apologised after comparing the Liberal Democrats to the Taliban. Now, I couldn't think of two better guests to debate this. They're from different ends of the political spectrum, but both are used to being viciously attacked by their political rivals. We'll be joined in just a moment by the Brexit Party MEP and former Tory frontbencher Anne Widdecombe. But right now, Liberal Democrat Home Affairs spokeswoman Christine Jardine is here. Now, Christine, Boris Johnson has said today that the attacks on female MPs are, in his words, absolutely appalling, but he won't change his language using words like surrender or the Surrender Act when referring to the Ben Bill. Do you think that's good enough from the PM?
No. I actually had a phone call this morning from a constituent who'd been upset by the language he was using, and I've had emails from people upset by the language he's using because they feel that it's being done deliberately and it's making the situation more tense. I see Amber Rudd has said today at one point that the language that's being used is in danger of inciting violence. I can't emphasise how much I feel it's important that we all in this step back from inflammatory language because we're in a very dangerous situation. And it's not. I don't think it's good enough to say that any MP shouldn't be attacked. To say that there should be no attacks on female MPs or no abuse, but still use inflammatory language because that, people hear that and it makes the situation worse. The two things go hand in hand. You can't separate them.
Is there any hypocrisy going on here, though, Christine? Because I think about the Mercury Awards when someone who was chaired by the Liberal left, some musician, gets up on stage with Boris Johnson's severed head, and that is celebrated. I just wonder if there's hypocrisy.
Not by me. Not by me. I mean, I don't think any of it is acceptable. And I don't think that, I know musicians claim and artists, claim sometimes things are satire, but it can go too far. And no, I think that sort of thing is not acceptable. I don't actually care which party it comes from or who it's about. Is not acceptable. I'm in the situation where I have friends who are facing death threats, whose children are threatened, and whose children are worried for their parents' safety, and that's in a democracy where we have always prided ourselves in being civil, and we talk about the British way, and they take the mickey out of us all over the world for having our cups of tea and a chat, and the infamous signs about keep calm and carry on. What has happened to all of that? What has happened to that natural civility and consideration for other people that has always been part of our way of life? Why are we now allowing basically the fabric of our society, not just Parliament, but democracy and the very fabric of our society to be undermined by reckless use of language, which is inflaming a situation?
Well, look, let me bring in Brendan O'Neill, who is the editor of Spiked Online. Brendan, Christine, very clear there. She says it doesn't matter which side of the political fence this is coming from, it's wrong. And Amber Rudd, in the splash of the Evening Standard today, saying that Boris Johnson's language does incite violence. This coming from a woman, Brendan, who was in his cabinet a matter of weeks ago. Do you think Boris overstepped the line over the past 48 hours?
Absolutely not. And I actually think this whole discussion is really spinning out of control. He used words like surrender, sabotage. These are everyday words. And, he didn't describe Jo Cox's horrific murder as humbug, which is what some people are saying. He said that the accusation that he is somehow lining up with people who killed the man who killed Jo Cox, he said that was humbug. So I just think this is really spinning out of control. I think we need to get a handle on this. These are normal words. It's a crucial part of political life that you can be colourful, you can be expressive, you can engage in hyperbole sometimes. I think if we crush if we take the spirit out of political discussion, we will really come to regret it.
David Lammy has tweeted about you today, Brendan, saying the right-wing commentator Brendan O'Neill calling for riots over Brexit is the height of irresponsibility. Lost lives, broken families, burnt-out homes, looted shops and damaged business and not some cheap talking point. What's your response?
Well, I don't really want to talk about the kind of Twitter storm. I'm not interested in getting involved in Twitter storms, which is why I don't use Twitter. But I would just say that, the point I was trying to make is that the British people have actually been incredibly patient. And there is a long tradition in this country, a very honourable tradition, of taking direct action when your democratic voice is silenced. We've seen that. We saw it during the Civil War in the 1640s. We saw it with the Chartist movement for the right of working class men to vote in the 1840s. And of course, we saw it with the suffragettes, who took numerous forms of direct action. And the thing that drove all those people was the very real feeling that their democratic voice had been silenced. I think we've now reached a situation where millions of people feel that their democratic vote and their democratic voice has been silenced. And I would not be surprised if there were protests and if there was some form of argumentation in public. I think British people have been patient, and I think the patience could run out.
Now, Christian Jardine, you have to acknowledge, given your party's position now to revoke Article 50, that may well prompt the very real prospect of civil unrest.
If people vote for us, we're not asking for civil unrest if people don't vote for us. What we are saying is this is a democratic process. We would prefer that the people had the final say democratically with a vote on a final deal, if we ever get one, or the situation as it stands at the moment. Do they want to progress with it or not? But if there is a general election, then people have the democratic right to go into the polling booth and cast a vote either for the Liberal Democrats as the main party of Remain or somebody else, knowing that if we are elected, then we are elected on a platform of revoking Article 50.
Even in cloud cuckoo land, even in a totally unbelievable scenario where the Lib Dems are the majority party after the next election, right?
Not according to the opinion polls, but never mind.
Well, let's just assume it's happened. Hell has frozen over. The Lib Dems are the majority parliament. Joe Swinson is the new Prime Minister. You won't have received 17.4 million votes. And actually, a general election mandate for the Lib Dems to run the country is certainly not the same thing as a once-in-a-generation Brexit referendum. You cannot conflate the two things.
What I am saying is that we are...
But you can't, can you? You cannot conflate the two things.
If I could just finish. I sat and listened to that what I found offensive, not from you, from the other guests, about, people, if the Lib Dems get their way, it will be, anti-democratic and there'll be violence and all the rest. But we're not calling for violence. We're not talking about violence. We're talking about voting democratically. And that's the problem with this discussion, is that too many people are now saying, oh, well, if you don't do what we want, then there'll be consequences. And it's becoming very threatening. Now, I sat in the Commons on Thursday after the debacle on Wednesday night with, the debate there, which was terrible. The tone was appalling. And Thursday, I expected, when we came to Jess Phillips' urgent question, that people would say, you know what, this has gone too far on all sides, but it has to stop. But every single time somebody said, and people were saying from all sides of the House, there were Conservatives saying it as well, that, this has to stop, and, the language is dreadful, it's inflammatory, it feels like a tactic, that it's been done deliberately. The government's only answer was, well, stop it, stop opposing Brexit and you'll stop getting abuse. It's threatening. Even that felt like we were being threatened. Now, for anyone to say that words like surrender and the terminology that's been used, for a journalist to say that is ridiculous, because
Okay,
we
well,
all know
look,
we all know
Christine
the power
Jardine,
of words.
Christine Jardine, Liberal Democrats Home Affairs spokesman, you stand by. I want to bring in now the Brexit Party MEP and the former Tory frontbencher Anne Widdecombe, a woman who has had to take her fair share of attacks over the years. Anne Widdecombe, how do you respond to what Christine Jardine says then? She says that even Boris Johnson using the word surrender is threatening to her.
No, nonsense. I use the word surrender myself when I'm describing Mrs May's deal, because that's what it is. Instead of implementing the referendum and leaving, we've still surrendered a huge amount of power to the EU. So I call it a surrender document. I have no qualms about doing that at all. And quite honestly, I've been called many worse things than I heard in the House of Commons yesterday. But I think that the public are thoroughly fed up. The tone does need to change. There needs to be a far more serious and civil approach. That much, I think, is undeniable. Picking on individual words and saying, this is... No, I don't go with that.
Was Boris Johnson right? I know he didn't raise her name in the first place, but was he right to bring Jo Cox and say that the late Jo Cox, the best way to honour her memory was to deliver Brexit? Was that a mistake by the Prime Minister, Anne?
Well, I think the phraseology was certainly a mistake. I mean, as you rightly say, he didn't raise the name of Jo Cox. What I think he was trying to say was that there will be no healing process until we've got over this and actually got Brexit done, and we can then look to the future. I think that's what he was trying to say. He didn't say it terribly well, I have to say. It's not for me to defend. He must defend himself.
Do you have sympathy, Anne, for the female MPs like Jess Phillips and like Jo Swinson who say that they feel under fire? They feel at risk. They feel that as women MPs, what they have to deal with is at times more extreme and more threatening than their male counterparts.
Well, first of all, no, any sympathy. When I came into the House of Commons, I came in not regarding myself at all as a woman MP, but as an MP who happened to be a woman. And I believe that I should do the job in exactly the same way and expect exactly the same treatment as a man would get. Where I do have sympathy now is that we're in a different ballgame because of social media. Wasn't around in my day, but that can be extremely uncomfortable because you don't know.
Oh, I think we're just losing you, Anne. Let me just see if you can come back. I think we've just lost Anne. Christine Jardine, let me give you the last word. Liberal Democrat Home Affairs spokeswoman. You've heard Anne Widdecombe there. She says she thinks Boris Johnson phrased it inartfully.
I think I agree with Anne. I think that's the best you can say about it, is that he meant to say something else and he phrased it badly. And certainly what he did say was not really acceptable. And I think the whole tone of debates in Parliament has to change. People are fed up with it. I have been at times over the past 2 or 3 weeks embarrassed by what has gone on in Parliament, the things that people are saying and the way that people have been treated.
It has been embarrassing.
I take Anne's point completely about, she would like to be judged not as a woman but as an MP. I think all women in Parliament would prefer to be judged as a woman or an MP. But what Jess and Jo were talking about was that women do get attacked in a way that men don't. I remember, I've seen, some of my colleagues when they stood up to answer questions when they were just new to the House after the maiden speech, getting, barracked in a way that the men in the same position weren't getting. And the abuse that has been handed out at the moment is mostly directed at women. And
no, it's terrible.
It wouldn't
terrible.
matter if it was directed at men or women. It's not acceptable.
No, absolutely. I think we've just got Anne Widdecombe back. Anne, I just wanted to ask you one final question, if that's okay, because I know you're at this big rally tonight with your leader, Nigel Farage. But just one final question, Anne. This anonymous minister briefing the Times today that they fear for riots on the streets of the UK if a second referendum overturns the Brexit result. Then in The Spectator this week, you have Labour Party sources suggesting that, in fact, they might now try and push for a second referendum before a general election if they are able to form some type of caretaker Remain alliance government. How worried are you, Anne, as a member of the Brexit Party about civil unrest and about riots on the streets?
Well, frankly, I'm tired of Project Fear on both sides. If you listen to the Remainers, they believe that they probably don't believe that if we use without steel, there's going to virtually be Armageddon, there's going to be chaos, there's going to be no food, there's going to be medicine shortages. I mean, it's just endless. And now you've got Brexiteers saying, well, you've got an anonymous minister saying, rather, we certainly haven't said it, you've got an anonymous minister talking about civil unrest. Well, calm down, everybody, and just get this done. Calm down.